What actions would you take if someone you were never meant to desire looked at you in a way that made your heart race? The question lingered in my mind, persistent and deeply perplexing, like an unspoken challenge I couldn't ignore. I knew it was wrong, but it stayed with me. It began so innocently, a glance. Not the type of glance you give someone you've always known, someone who's been in your life for years. It wasn't the playful look exchanged over dinner or the smile shared after a well-timed joke. This was different. His gaze lingered longer than it should, as if time itself had stretched in that moment. The tension in the air was palpable, an unspoken weight between us. I should have looked away, I should have ignored it, but I didn't. And that was the beginning. On that particular night, silence descended on the house like a heavy fog. The kind of silence that fills a space, making you acutely aware of every small sound. My husband, Mark, was away again, off on another business trip. It was starting to feel routine, his absences, his constant justifications, and the growing distance between us. I had stopped questioning him long ago. The absence of his presence between us had turned into its own kind of answer, a quiet acknowledgement that things had changed. Noah, my stepson, had been living with us since he was 16, after his mother's untimely death. He had grown into a young man over the years, no longer the withdrawn teenager I once knew. At 22, he was confident, restless, and unmistakably more attractive than I cared to admit. His presence was commanding, yet he carried with him an energy that both intrigued and unsettled me. His smile, once innocent and youthful, now had the power to disarm even the coldest hearts. His eyes, once full of uncertainty, now burned with a quiet intensity, and when he looked at me, I felt it, something unspoken, something forbidden. That night, I sat alone on the couch, a glass of wine in hand, pretending to watch a rom-com on the screen, but in truth, my mind was elsewhere. The flickering light from the television cast shadows on the walls, and the sweet, calming scent of vanilla from the candle I'd lit filled the air. I had tried to occupy myself with simple distractions, anything to push away the unsettling thoughts that had begun to swirl around in my head. But then, I heard the familiar sound of footsteps approaching. Subdued, purposeful, and yet somehow, unsettling. Noah appeared in the doorway, bare-chested, his body glistening with sweat from a workout. He looked so different now, grown-up, mature, and undeniably appealing. His presence filled the room, and for a moment, I felt my heart skip. I told myself to look away, to focus on anything but him, but my eyes betrayed me. He ran his fingers through his dark hair, the movement causing his biceps to flex, and that's when it hit me, the sudden awareness of him, of his proximity, and the undeniable pull between us. He smirked, that playful, confident smirk of his. And spoke, his voice warm but teasing, "Looks like you're burning the midnight oil." "Sleep eludes me," I whispered, my voice almost distant as I tried to pull my gaze back to the screen. But Noah didn't leave. Instead, he moved closer, so close that I could feel the heat radiating off his body. His scent, fresh sweat mingled with the faint trace of his cologne, was intoxicating. The warmth of him enveloped me, drawing me in despite every logical instinct telling me to push him away. As he settled next to me, much too close for comfort, I felt my pulse quicken. His body brushed against mine, and it sent a surge of electricity through my veins. I tried to steady myself, to calm the sudden storm that had erupted inside me. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper, as if his words were somehow part of a much larger unspoken conversation. "I'm fine," I replied, taking a long sip of wine to steady my hands, to occupy myself, to break the tension. The air between us was thick, charged with something unspoken, and I could no longer deny the weight of the moment. "I have something to tell you," he said, his voice soft but earnest. The words hit me with an unexpected force, a combination of vulnerability and raw emotion. I froze, my heart racing. The way he looked at me, his gaze falling to my lips, was almost too much to bear. I should have said something, anything, to break the moment. But I didn't. I couldn't. He swallowed hard, and for a moment, there was nothing but silence. "I've never been with anyone," he confessed, the words tumbling out like a secret he had been holding for years. His eyes never left mine, and in that moment, I saw it, the raw, unfiltered truth of his longing, the yearning that had been building inside him for so long. My heart hammered in my chest as his words cut through the air like a blade. "I don't want just anyone," he continued, his voice rough. "I want it to mean something." My breath caught in my throat as I fought to process what he was saying. The room seemed to close in on me, the walls pressing against me, as if the world itself was narrowing to this one moment. My mind screamed at me to stop, to walk away, to remind myself of the boundaries that should never be crossed. But when his hand found mine, rough and warm, and his fingers intertwined with mine, I was paralyzed. His touch was too much, too overwhelming, yet too soothing all at once. Every logical instinct screamed at me to pull away, but I didn't. I should have stopped it. I should have stepped back, but instead, I allowed the moment to stretch longer than it ever should have. The air between us thickened, charged with unspoken desires, and in that moment, everything I had known about family, loyalty, and trust began to unravel. The night that followed was a blur, a single, reckless act that shattered the foundation of everything I thought I understood. The consequences of that moment would forever alter the course of my life, my marriage, and the family I had tried so desperately to protect. This was just the beginning of a much larger story, one filled with regret, confusion, and the harsh reality of human desires and mistakes. I am Vivian Hale, and I had long ago given up on the idea of happiness. My life, from the outside, seemed perfect, everything anyone could want. But hidden beneath that polished exterior was a woman suffocating under the weight of her own choices. This story is not just about a single night, but about everything that led to it. He was a dozen years her senior, divorced and bore the silent sorrow of a man who had laid to rest his first wife far too early. I did not harbor any affection for him, yet I found myself drawn to him, and at 30, with my aspirations collecting dust, to feel a sense of liking seemed sufficient. After a span of 18 months we exchanged vows and entered into marriage, a wise choice my mother remarked. Will look after you, and he indeed did, simply not in the ways that truly counted. A step family that always felt out of place. Upon marrying Mark, I found myself embracing a shadow. Noah, his 16-year-old son at the time, Noah embodied the essence of a storm cloud, a tempestuous presence in the guise of a man. He was brooding and closed off, still raw from the loss of his mother. During those initial months his words were few and far between. Shot me a glare from beneath his tousled dark hair, as if I were an unwelcome intruder. Attempted, alas, I made an earnest attempt. I prepared his beloved dishes, spaghetti with an abundance of garlic. I was present at his soccer games. He never sought me out among the crowd. I took the time to frame a photograph of his mother and placed it delicately on his dresser, cast it into the depths of a drawer. That night a sound of weeping drifted through the closed door of his bedroom. I refrained from knocking, remained silent. I simply positioned myself outside, me back resting against the wall, and remained in that place until the tears ceased to flow. The following morning he prepared coffee for me for the very first time. It lay charred and desolate. I savored every last drop. Time flowed on. Noah transformed into a man with a commanding presence and a keen intellect, possessing his father's smile yet devoid of any semblance of restraint. That departed for college, returned home, and drifted through a series of part-time jobs. Mark feigned ignorance to his son's aimlessness. He feigned ignorance of my presence. Our marriage was not unkind. The space lay devoid of any presence. With ceased our contact, ceased all conversation, drifted into slumber as if two strangers occupying the same space. I reassured myself that it was just a part of life. The fervor that once burned brightly has dimmed for Alan. That moment I discovered him engrossed in a conversation with her through his phone. The thoughts of last night linger in my mind, refusing to fade away. He asserted it was a coworker error. I found it hard to trust his words, yet what options remained for me? Depart, begin anew at 42, stripped of all. Thus I remained. Night the 8th, that fateful night when everything transformed, the moment I truly laid eyes on Noah, not as my stepson, but as a man. It was 3 months prior to the kiss. He returned home in the late hours, reeking of beer and the warmth of summer. His t-shirt hugged his chest tightly as I stood at the sink rinsing a delicate wine glass. Quietly approached from behind to fetch a glass of water. His chest grazed my back. Stillity did as well. In a fleeting moment that seemed to defy reality, the atmosphere surrounding us was electric. Murmured an apology before departing, yet his gaze remained fixed. For the first time in years I experienced the profound sensation of being truly seen, the revelation that shattered my very being. I have yet to share my life with another. When Noah confessed to being a virgin, I ought to have brushed it aside with a laugh. He was playfully taunted, utilized the maternal card, yet the manner in which he gazed at me, as if I possessed the key to a fervent plea, unraveled me. For years no one had gazed at me in such a way, not Mark, no one at all. As his fingers glided over my wrist silently, Inquiring, I made the fateful decision that would lead to our undoing. I should have stopped him. I didn't. That failure would cost us both dearly. Why you find yourself sympathizing with her even as you grapple with your own self-loathing? It seems you are passing judgment on me at this moment. In the stillness I perceive it though. Could she possibly? What sort of woman engages in such behavior? Yet the reality is this: all I desired was Noah, yearned for a sense of belonging to transcend the role of a mere placeholder in my own existence. And when he kissed me after all those years, I felt a surge of life within me, and that fateful nighttime itself seemed to stand still. The air was thick with humidity on that summer evening, rendering clothes of burdensome weight. Mark had departed for yet another business journey, the same one he embarked on each month, consistently coming back with a subtle fragrance lingering on his collar that did not belong to me. The silence of the house was palpable. An unsettling emptiness that lingered in the air, just a half-empty bottle of Merlot, and the restless energy of a man who is not my husband. No, he had exhibited a distinct change throughout the week, heightened intensity in the moment, hovering in the thresholds, grazing my side as we pass in the corridor. His gaze lingered for a moment too long on my bare legs as I stretched out on the couch. I assured myself that I remained oblivious. We gathered around the kitchen table, engaged in a spirited game of cards, a foolish drinking game he had picked up during his college days. With a playful smirk he quipped that strip poker would be a lot more entertaining. As he took a swig of his beer, I let out a weary sigh, my eyes drifting upward in exasperation. One can only dream. Yet my pulse quickened, for he was not truly jesting. I observed it in the manner his fingers drummed against the table, filled with unease, as his gaze deepened. A shadow flickered across his expression when I savored the wine from my lips, and then he betrayed trust with intention. It was absurd, and I couldn't help but chuckle as I confronted him. Are you certain? His voice fell gravely and warm. Perhaps it's the sting of defeat that doesn't sit well with you. I extended my hand toward his card. She delicately grasped my wrist. His hold was not firm, yet it wasn't exactly loose either, and his thumb, oh that thumb, caressed the tender skin beneath my palm in languid, purposeful circles. The atmosphere surrounding us grew dense. Neither of us stirred. Then a voice barely above a whisper: please urge me to cease. I did not. Before I could even process the moment, his lips found theirs on mine in a state of utter despair. Starving, the kiss held a tender sweetness, exuded a soft tenderness. It was an assertion, every tooth and flick of the tongue a yearning held in suspense. His hands wove through my hair, and a moan of pleasure escaped my throat. I ought to have distanced myself from him. Instead, I held on to him tightly, his form pressed firmly against me, every sinew taut and every inch of skin ablaze. His scent was a mix of sweat and cheap beer, intertwined with a darker, more primal essence that tightened my stomach. His hand moved without thought a moment too far. I recoiled, instantly horrified by what was happening. I desire you, he murmured against my lips. Little do you know the depths of my longing for this moment. I certainly did, for I had desired it as well. The kitchen counter pressed uncomfortably against my back as he hoisted me onto it, sending the wine glass tumbling to the floor. It broke into countless pieces on the floor. Neither of us gave it a second thought. His mouth descended along my neck, teeth grazing my pulse point, and I tilted my head back with a sharp intake of breath. His hands, oh those hands, roamed freely, tracing the contours of my body as if he had etched every curve into his memory. During the night, he confessed, his voice trembling with emotion, that he had pondered this deeply. Each evening the revelation ought to have filled me with dread. For the first time in years I experienced the profound sensation of being truly seen, the revelation that shattered my very being. I have yet to share my life with another. When Noah confessed his virginity, I ought to have chuckled, poked fun at him, and played the nurturing role. Yet the way he gazed at me, as if I possessed the key to a fervent wish, unraveled me. For years no one had gazed at me in such a way, not Mark, no one in particular. As his fingers glided over my wrists, silently inquiring, I chose the path that would lead to our undoing. I should have stopped him. I didn't. That failure would cost us both dearly. What is it about her that you comprehend even as you grapple with self-loathing? For that very understanding it seems you are forming an opinion about me at this moment. In the stillness I perceive it. How could she possibly? What sort of woman engages in such behavior? Yet the reality is this: all I desired was Noah. I longed for a sense of being deseretto, transcend the role of mere placeholder in my own existence. In that moment as his lips met mine for the first time in 10 long years, a surge of vitality coursed through me, and that fateful nighttime itself seemed to come to a standstill. The air was thick with humidity, wrapping around the skin like an unwelcome embrace, turning garments into a form of torment. Mark had departed for yet another business journey, the same one he visited each month, consistently coming back with a subtle fragrance on his collar that didn't belong to me. The silence of the house was palpably an overwhelming emptiness that lingered in the air, just a half-empty bottle of Merlot and the restless energy of a man who is not my husband. Noah, he had exhibited a distinct change throughout the week, heightened intensity in greater attendance, hovering in the thresholds, grazing my side as we pass in the corridor. His gaze lingered For a moment too long on my bare legs as I stretched out on the couch I assured myself that I remained oblivious. We gathered around the kitchen table engaged in a spirited game of cards, a foolish drinking game he had picked up during his college days. Strip poker would be more entertaining, quipped, a playful smirk dancing on his lips. As he took a sip of his beer I let out an exasperated sigh. One can only hope, yet my heart raced, for he was not truly jesting. It was evident in the way his fingers drummed against the tablia, restless rhythm echoing his unease. As his gaze deepened I could feel the weight of his attention when I traced my tongue along my lips, savoring the wine. And then he betrayed trust. Intentional? That's absurd, I chuckled, confronting him directly. Are you certain? His voice fell gravely and unrefined. Perhaps it's the sting of defeat that doesn't sit well with you. I extended my hand toward his cards. He delicately grasped my wrist. His hold was not firm yet. It wasn't exactly loose either, and his thumb, oh that thumb, caressed the tender skin beneath my palm. And language, intentional circles. The atmosphere surrounding us grew dense. Neither of us stirred. Then a voice emerged, scarcely rising above a whisper. Please urge me to cease. I did not. Before I could even process the moment his lips found theirs on mine, despairing, ravenous. The kiss held a tender sweetness, exuded a gentle demeanor. It was an assertion, every tooth and tongue brimming with unfulfilled desire. His hands wove through my hair, and a moan escaped my throat, a sound of pure pleasure. I ought to have distanced myself from him. Instead, I held on to him tightly, his body pressed firmly against mine, every sinew taut, and every inch of blaze. His scent was a mix of sweat, cheap beer, and an unsettling darker essence that tightened my stomach. His hand moved without thought a moment too far. I recoiled, instantly horrified by what was happening. I desire you, he murmured against my lips. The depth of my longing for this moment is beyond your comprehension. I certainly did, for I had desired it as well. The edge of the kitchen counter pressed uncomfortably against my back as he hoisted me onto it, sending the wine glass tumbling to the floor. It broke into countless pieces on the floor. Neither of us gave it a second thought. His mouth descended along my neck, teeth grazing my pulse point, and I tilted my head back with a sharp intake of breath. His hands, oh those hands, traced every contour of my body as if he had etched it into his very dreams. I've pondered this, he confessed, his voice trembling with emotion. Each night the revelation ought to have filled me with dread. The inscription, for how long did you believe you could remain concealed? The message arrived at 2:37 in the morning. Restless, I lay entwined in the sheets, me body still resonating with the echoes of Noah's touch from hours past. Mark lay beside me, lost in his oblivious snoring. Suddenly my phone illuminated the darkness. Unfamiliar number. You have a mere 24 hours to convey your message to him, or I shall. A new photo was included. Noah pinned me against the hallway wall, my head tilted back, his lips trailing along my throat. My stomach plummeted. There was a whisper of knowledge in the air. They were not merely observers, they lingered in anticipation. The following 6 hours unfolded in a blur of anxiety as I raced through a myriad of possibilities. The individual residing next door, Mrs. Adler, perpetually lurking behind her blinds, had a habit of observing whenever Noah's car lingered beyond its usual hour. Mark's aide, the kind-eyed woman who had inadvertently forwarded me those dinner receipts, or for heaven's sake Mark himself, laying a snare to gauge the depth of my descent. Noah, upon seeing the texts, merely smirked. Allow them to speak. Have you lost your mind? I let out a sharp hiss. This has the potential to bring about our downfall. He cradled my face, his thumb gliding over my quivering lip. It might ultimately liberate us. The subsequent message proved to be even more troubling. Unidentified caller, let us rendezvous this evening. It was 9 o'clock in the evening. The weathered boathouse. Arrive by yourself, or the entire town bears witness. I gazed at the text until it became a haze before my eyes. This transcended mere blackmail. A moment of reckoning unfolded. I discovered Mark in his study, filling a glass with whiskey that was already brimming. His knuckles were pale, gripping the bottle tightly. We need to talk, I said. Averted his gaze concerning Noah. The breath escaped from my chest. Was aware. All this time he was aware. I anticipated fury. Lap let out a cry. Instead, Mark merely let out a weary sigh. I have been eagerly anticipating your words. Hot tears stung my eyes. What is the duration? From the very first moment he finally met my gaze, his own emptied. The lenses captured your presence. Photographic devices. The word struck with the force of a blow. He had captured us on film. Mark pushed his laptop across the table in my direction, displayed before us Noah and I in the kitchen. His hands slipped beneath my shirt in the living room. My lips brushed against his neck. Within the confines of our shared sanctuary, I murmured, you orchestrated this. Proof was essential. His voice carried an unsettling tranquility regarding the dissolution of the marriage. A chilling awareness enveloped me. He urged me to betray my principles, thus he could depart unscathed. Then arrived the ultimate strike. Noah's gone, Mark said. What is this? He was sent to his grandfather's in Colorado forever. Savored his whiskey. Unless you wish for me to take legal action. My blood froze in my veins. Mark had meticulously orchestrated this moment, each stride, each motion. At that moment he possessed every advantage. I dove for the laptop, sending it crashing to the ground. Mark remained unperturbed. It's backed up, he stated matter-of-factly. A cry of frustration bubbled within my, yearning for release. Instead I took the only course of action available to Mayhay, ran the boathouse, stood silent and deserted. There is no blackmailer, there shall be no clash, merely my image mirrored in the shadowy depths of the water. A woman who had staked it all and defeated Mark was swift in his actions. The documents came 3 days following my unsuccessful attempt to flee, presented by an impassive attorney who steadfastly avoided my gaze. The conditions were harsh. There shall be no alimony clause on infidelity section 4. Be no assertion to the resident's infidelity in marriage. Exhibit D. Video recordings. There has been no communication with Noah. Restraining order is currently in progress. I inscribed my name at the bottom, hands trembling, and returned it silently. What could possibly be expressed? I brought this upon myself in a small town. Whispers of scandal spread like wildfire. When I finally summoned the courage to venture outdoors, the stairs trailed behind me as if they were my own shadows. The grocery store cashier, a familiar face I had encountered for years, pressed her lips together and averted her gaze. Neighbors would traverse the street, deliberately steering clear of my presence. Even the barista at the coffee shop, once so familiar with my name, feigned ignorance of my presence. I was no longer the esteemed Vivian Hale, the devoted wife, the reliable friend. I was that woman, the woman who crossed a boundary that never should have been touched, the individual who shattered her union, the one who surrendered to capture. I made an attempt to reach Noah by phone at one time, 8-20 times. His number was no longer in service. Mark had ensured that was the case. The last time I laid eyes on him, he was consumed by fury, a tempest of emotions bowing. He would discover a path back to me, yet that was prior to the moment his father cast a shadow of legal devastation over him, prior to his departure for Colorado, before he came to understand that I wasn't worth the price. In a frigid November night, I made my way to the lake, the very spot where Mark and I once took Noah fishing all those years back. The water appeared as a deep, inky black infinite. I found myself at the precipice, my toes gripping the weathered planks of the dock beneath me, and wept, lamenting the path my desires had forged. Would anyone truly care? Suddenly a vibration stirred in my pocket, signaling the arrival of a message, a solitary message from an unfamiliar number. Refrain. The identity of the sender remained a mystery to me, yet I came to a halt. Ultimately all turned out well as the first light of dawn crept through the curtains. I stirred from my slumber. I relocated to another state. I have altered my name. I accepted a position at a bookstore, a place where my history remained a secret to all. On certain nights Noah still haunts my dreams, his hands, his mouth, the way he gazed at me as if I were the sole focus of his universe. Yet the truth lingers in my mind. I was never the protagonist in his love story. I was merely his act of defiance. He belonged to me. Longing burns like an unquenchable flame, envelopes you, it captivates you, and if you're not vigilant it may very well destroy your existence. A year later a postcard made its way to me. There is no return address provided, only 3 words penned in a recognizable hand. Did it hold any value? I remained silent, yet beneath the surface the answer is already a resounding no. Noah's future life unraveled through a relentless sequence of sharp, unforgiving consequences that commenced the instant his father cast him away, deprived of his trust fund, his good name, and any link to the woman he vowed he could not survive without. Came to Colorado, eyes sunken and filled with rage, collapsing onto his grandfather's couch in a small mountain town where the whispers of his disgrace greeted him even before he set foot off the bus. The murmurs trailed behind him, ethereal and haunting. He is the young man who shared a bed with his stepmother, the individual who shattered his family, and despite his attempts to submerge the memories in whiskey and wild brawls, the reality adhered to him as if it were a second skin. His formerly enchanting smile had transformed into a derisive sneer. His confidence gave way to a seething anger that led to the loss of job after job, leaving him with nothing but the toil of manual labor, laboring beneath the relentless sun, wielding a hammer until his hands were raw and bloodied. Meanwhile his father's attorneys ensured that any communication with Miriam remained impossible. It hardly held significance after the 5th and unanswered letter dispatched to her former address, each one steeped in increasing desperation. I still love you. I never intended for this to unfold. I will seek a path back to you. Yet she had already disappeared, slipping into a new existence where he was absent. The awareness hollowed him out, taking something essential, leaving him empty until one fateful night, intoxicated and shaking in a motel room after years of silence, he finally picked up the phone to call his father. With a quiver in my voice I asked, why did you do this to me? Exclusively for Mark. With a chilling sense of conclusion the words echoed back, you brought this upon yourself. And in that instant Noah grasped the full weight of the truth. There existed no salvation, triumphant return, only the gradual oppressive burden of an error that would forever shape his identity. Ceased the struggle, abandoned his dreams, and allowed the years to reshape him into a figure more rigid, more frigid, a man who floated through connections like a specter, unable to trust, to forge genuine closeness, perpetually anticipating the inevitable fall. It was one autumn evening, as I approached the threshold of 30, he stood outside a diner in a nondescript town, gazing through the window at a woman whose resemblance to Miriam stirred a familiar ache in his chest. For the first time in 10 years he permitted himself to ponder the question, what if I had chosen to walk away? Yet the thought weighed heavily on him, so he lit a cigarette, pulled his collar up against the biting wind, and continued on his path. For some roads lead in a singular direction, and his had reached its end long ago. The narrative unfolds as a poignant warning regarding the devastating effects of illicit longing and the lasting repercussions of self-centered decisions. It demonstrates how fleeting passion can dismantle lives when rationality is forsaken for desire, uncovering the truth that what starts as an exhilarating breach of boundaries frequently culminates in solitude and remorse. With Miriam's journey demonstrating how emotional neglect in a marriage can create vulnerability to dangerous temptations but never justifies betrayal, while Noah's fate shows how youthful obsession and inexperience can be manipulated into lifelong damage. The narrative emphasizing that taboo relationships carry hidden costs far beyond physical pleasure, eroded trust, fractured families, and permanent stains on one's identity and social standing, with neither character emerging unscathed as Miriam loses her marriage, home, and dignity, while Noah loses his future and capacity for healthy relationships. The story underscoring how society harshly judges those who violate fundamental moral boundaries, particularly when power dynamics are unequal. The plot revealing how easily desire can mutate into obsession and how quickly secrets become weapons in the hands of those wronged, with Mark's cold revenge proving that some betrayals awaken a calculated cruelty even in previously indifferent partners. The tale warning that forbidden romances rarely end in mutual happiness, but rather in asymmetric destruction where the more vulnerable party, Noah, suffers disproportionate. Life conclusion suggesting that some mistakes cannot be undone no matter how deeply regretted, only endured as permanent lessons. The story ultimately functioning as a dark mirror showing viewers their own potential for moral failure when starved for validation and connection, challenging readers to examine what voids in their own lives might make them susceptible to similar temptations, while affirming that some boundaries exist for profound societal and psychological reasons. The narrative structure itself serving as moral instruction by ensuring neither protagonist finds redemption or reunion but only the hollow aftermath of their choices, the lack of happy ending reinforcing that certain lines once crossed cannot be uncrossed. The final postcard's haunting question, was it worth it? The narrative looms with a fundamental question that every character must face before taking action. Its strength resides in an unflinching portrayal of reality devoid of sanitization or convenient absolution. Instead, it lays bare the aftermath of desire with stark honesty, serving as a cautionary tale that some flames are best left unkindled, for they cannot be tamed, only endured.